So let's talk a little more about experiences along the way. I want to reiterate that my orientation, my relationship to both the experiences and to sharing these experiences is with the understanding that they can help inform our dialogue with reality, our relationship to ultimate reality. And that if we give ourselves permission to extrapolate, to follow to the ultimate consequence and experience that we have before, during, or late in the spiritual path, that it is important work to do insofar as it can change the way you see and understand. So I'm sharing my own experiences with an eye toward allowing you to recognize in your own experience certain moments that may have been outside of the normal current that can, if acknowledged and given the proper status in your array of information, can get you closer to understanding things as they are. So this is part 2. You can look for mapping experience, part 1, to begin at the beginning. When we left off, I was describing my experience of time as space. Now I want to turn to experience I had, especially in my teenage years, but I would say kind of all of my teenage years, and then maybe it was integrated in such a way that it became less surprising to me, to my own understanding. And that was a kind of direct, intuitive knowing of kind of specific details about a person, about their past, about their preferences, like a favorite color, or details about the person they were in a relationship with, or pleasant or unpleasant details about their past. And I ended up sort of rationalizing this to myself as a kind of processing as intuition, a kind of processing of data that I was unaware of taking in. And then deciding that this was a kind of pattern recognition, like people who look this way or walk this way or wear this kind of thing or gesture or facial expression or something subtle, that they would have relationship, sort of strong pattern overlap with a person whom I had known well in the past. And if I kind of transposed the details, it would turn out much of that was right. And I think that was on the one hand accurate, but actually it was, at least in part, and maybe predominantly, a outside of time and space direct knowing that has implications for what time is and what space is and what individuals are. And I think this kind of experience in particular, if you allow yourself, you may find you have had it too. It's kind of along the same lines as a deja vu type experience, but one which is maybe more common and more a little bit harder to write off, like you know these details, and when you test your theory, turns out to be accurate. So that's just a little window into one of these things. Another category was kind of visionary type poetry, in which I would get images, or I would often kind of let the rhyme guide me to what happened next, and then I would find various surprising things. And one would be like using words, especially when I was younger, using words that I'd never read, that turned out to fit well in the context, and it all worked, and so it was as if it was a kind of channeling. But then, sort of more concerning in the perspective of the time, was I would write things that would later happen. And I was not suggesting any causal relationship there, but merely a sort of outside of time and space perception, which is easy to understand in a way once we are shuttling to and from this kind of timeless, stateless state that includes all time and all space, and the detailed perception from this node of being that we call the individual. So, in terms of channeling, I think I will return to it later because it becomes a little bit more kind of explicit in my internal experience later on. I had the rather strange sort of confusion of seeing, this was in college, of seeing a kind of blockbuster movie, and that was kind of psychological in its nature. And then having the very clear feeling as if I had written it, and I had very much not. But there was a kind of merging of identity, and it could have just been a sleepless delusion or something, I don't know. But it feels to me like it fits in this conversation. And again, these I mean to bring up sort of categories of experience in which you might recognize your own experience and then have the opportunity to follow them to their consequence. In college, I became a painter, and my kind of mode of painting was to paint these fields of being, and it was a mode arrived at intuitively, but most likely influenced by reading Heidegger and fields of being as part of his language. But given that it so much synchronizes with how I now understand and experience the world from having made some progress on the spiritual path, and you know, in this long arc alchemical project of integrating recognition and following it through to its consequences, or allowing it to mature and ripen, to consume all of my perceptual experience. Seeing things as fields of sort of coherent moments, particles of energy. In retrospect, that feels like a spiritual insight. And so how you might translate that into your own experience, one possibility, it seems to me, is any category in which you're engaged in creative production, especially one in which you successfully feel like you're getting out of the way and you're in the zone, in modern language perhaps, but feel like you're directly, something's coming through. That we can relate to those almost as if somebody else created them, and like it's a teaching that you can respect and integrate in a different sort of way, perhaps. So, as a painter, as my painting developed, and beyond college and such, and I have a kind of first principles orientation to whatever I do, and so I was returning to the oldest manuscripts about painting and materials and mediums, and in this context encountered a kind of overlap of painting history and medicinal and sort of alchemical orientation to materials and how they might transform from base mineral to luminosity, based on specific treatments and whatnot. But in researching in this direction was how I first encountered Taoist internal alchemy. And it was not an obvious thread to pull on at the time. I encountered it via this Magento website written in all caps. Not something you'd be inclined to take seriously. But it was the initial surfacing of this idea that would become central to how I practiced and experienced. So that is a category of experience in which we can learn to listen to the things that seem out of place that arise in our view, in our screen, in our surface experience, that sometimes are worth teasing out with the understanding that we don't understand. And it was in this same time that I first encountered, at least in a serious way, the Tao Te Ching. And had this feeling of remembrance and recognition and total synchronicity, kind of overlapping of pattern with the worldview, philosophical view that I've developed through poetry and painting, which included kind of fields of being and the inability to state something with clarity and certainty without the acknowledgement that it was a temporary functional statement and not one that held, that conveyed the meaning itself, because that was elusive and disappeared when bound by a word or a mark on a canvas. I used to call them bridge fictions, which is to say something that I will state now in order to get from here to there, but with the understanding that it can never be all of what is meant. Because to draw a meaning is a form of elision, like it operates by virtue of leaving out. So it can never be the whole picture, fundamentally. Okay, this video is getting long. I hope that's helpful, that you can relate some of these kinds of things to your experience. And the next video in this series will start to encompass the experiences that I had while practicing intensively for first 5 years of my serious spiritual practice, in which I was doing kind of active, energetic practice for 6 or 8 hours a day. And that led to a lot of sort of mind-altering. But even then, I didn't fully integrate those experiences as much as I could have. And that, to reiterate, the purpose of these videos is to give you the opportunity to reflect on the experiences you have had and see them as windows into the real. See you next time.